So the average rents in Toronto have seen a year-over-year decline, and the rental market is starting to show signs of cooling off and slow down, well, at least according to an article that I read recently. But isn't enough to ease the financial burden that a lot of tenants are seeing with the rise in cost of living. So according to rentals.ca, the average rents in Toronto have taken a 0.8 year-over-year decline in prices. But according to that same article, Toronto also ranks as the third most expensive city to rent in Canada, with average one beds going for $2,600 and average two beds going for $3,424, which is actually on the two bed year-over-year increase of 2.7% and a year-over-year increase for one beds of 1.4%. I think what the article is trying to convey is that rents are not rising as fast as they were over the last few years. I think we're all pretty much aware of what was going on with the rents over the last 3 years and how they were spiking and skyrocketing, mainly due to the fact that interest rates were spiking. But if you guys remember, during COVID, there was this huge urban exodus where loads of people were leaving downtown Toronto, leaving condos vacant, and rents had gone down significantly. Landlords were giving their tenants breaks in terms of rent relief. But then shortly after that, we started seeing a spike in rents again because the Bank of Canada started to raise interest rates. So a lot of the buyers who had hopes of entering the market and buying a property started opting to rent instead. And of course, the population growth at that same time didn't exactly help because, as you can see in this chart, starting from January 2021 and to now, the population growth in Ontario exceeded dramatically. So because the rise in interest rate brought a lot of demand to the rental market combined with the rise in population, that created a supply-demand issue. I mean, things have gotten so bad recently that even roommate rentals have gone up significantly. I mean, with Toronto averaging at $1,312 per room, which is the second highest right after Vancouver. I mean, things are so bad. Somebody was renting out half of their bed just a couple weeks ago on Facebook Marketplace for over $900. Another thing to keep in mind is that any units that were occupied after November of 2018 don't have any rent control. So, landlords can pretty much hike the rents to whatever amount they want without having to worry about the rent guidelines. So what we started seeing recently, especially over the last year, was especially with these new buildings that were built after 2018, whenever a tenant would move out, a landlord in that building would hike up the rent, by several $100s. Because again, there's no rent control in those buildings, and then they would set a new market rent for that building. Having said that, yes, we are experiencing a bit of a slowdown, and there are a few factors and variables that's causing that. One of which is seasonality. Not everybody wants to move in the wintertime, especially around the holidays. There's also a spike in inventory right now for a couple of reasons. Number one, newly built inventory and newly built condos that are coming up for occupancy right now. There's a rise in buildings that are coming up in certain pockets of Toronto. I mean, let's take a look at this 5 to Fries, which is River and Fifth by Broccolini, which is in occupancy right now, actually. And there's 34 units for rent in that building, and that building is only up to the 6th floor in occupancy, and there's over 30 floors in that building that are still coming up. Then you've got another example here of 36 Zora, which is in Etobicoke, also in its occupancy phase right now, not fully occupied yet, and they also have about 32 leases for sale. So what happens in this scenario is because there's so much competition within a building, the landlords are competing with one another, so they're forced to, a lot of times, reduce rent in order to quickly rent out their unit so they don't have to pay carrying costs. And of course, they have to pay occupancy fees to the builder, which with interest rates now are also quite high. And the other reason is investors are also starting to realize that they're not going to get top dollar for their condos right now in this market. They're seeing a lot of other investors and other condos, especially in downtown core, struggling to sell their units, especially the ones that are tenanted, and significantly reducing their asking price, which is bringing the overall values of condo prices down, especially in that downtown core and immediate, pockets of many different pockets of Toronto. So what a lot of investors are now doing is instead of trying to sell it, they're opting to rent it out instead, which is again increasing the inventory. And lastly, people are just choosing to stay where they are right now. They're not necessarily looking to move because, moving is expensive now with the rents being so high. A lot of people are realizing getting a new place to rent is going to cost them a lot more, not to mention the moving expenses, which obviously rack up. So it's cheaper for them to just stay where they are, which is again also fueling further inventory. Now, where will rents go? I don't see rents taking a drastic decline in prices over the next little while, especially while rates are higher for longer. But if inventory does keep building up, then I'm curious to see how much rental prices will go down in the next several months going into 2024. Do I think they'll come back to pre-pandemic levels? I doubt it. And if rates do start going down in 2024 and a lot of buyers come back from the sidelines to go and enter the market, that may further increase rental inventory and maybe bring rental prices down even further. Thank you guys for watching the video. If you found some value, please go ahead and hit the like button. And if you're new to this channel, please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Take care.